Welcome back to this week's episode with Ryder Realty's podcast. I'm Katelyn Palfy, and I'm here with Esta Ryder. And this week, we are going to be talking about budget. So, when you get pre-approved with the bank, there's certain things that go against your debt-to-income score and certain things that don't. And we're going to go over how to plan for your budget to know that you can afford your mortgage affordably.
So this is my story I want to tell. I just talked to someone last week, and she called me and she said we are pre-approved. I think it was up to 200 or 210. She goes, we don't want to go that high. And I said, did you talk to the lender and find out like what payment amount you're comfortable with, where that puts you? And they were increasing their budget from what they had for rent over what they were paying for house payment. So it's not like they weren't flexible, but what they could actually pay in a payment and be in their comfort level was $100,000. And that's a big difference from 100 to 200. So, but that's the thing. They knew what their household budget was. And I know for me, and I'm sure for you, don't you have clients a lot of times who are like, I'm approved here and it's a way high number, but I want to be here, as they're factoring in their budget? Do you see that too?
Oh yeah, definitely. And actually I'm working with people right now that had just sent me a thing this morning of this was what their payment was going to be at this month because they were thinking about increasing their budget and then they backtracked and decided they wanted to keep it where it was at. And I think that monthly payment helps so much more than a price of an overall price on a house.
Yes, I agree, because it fits into their
real life.
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. So were you living at home right before you got married, or were you on your own?
No,
okay.
I was at home.
So did you really have any expenses there? Like what did you have in your budget when you were at home?
When I was at home, I was just paying my student loans. I think I was paying towards my car insurance maybe. I think I did have a car payment then too.
Okay. So when you guys got married, what did it add?
It added your mortgage, your gas, your electric.
Oh, that's right, because you guys had a mortgage right away.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mortgage, gas, electric, internet, cell phones, both of our car payments, then both of our student loans started coming in.
Yeah. Well, your car payments and student loan and mortgage have been included on your debt to income.
Yep.
So but a lot of the other stuff isn't. And now you have 2 little kids. Mm-hmm. So what things have been added to your budget now that wouldn't be on your debt to income?
Of course, like groceries, diapers, baby clothes, because I have a kids' clothes obsession, that kind of stuff. But now
that brings up a good point.
Yeah. If
you have a vice, is what I'm looking for. If you have something that's important to you, like a splurge, you have to be honest and real with yourself to put that in your budget.
I think the new trend now is the eyelash extensions. If you're going to pay for those eyelashes every 2 weeks, you need to put that in your budget because... or to get your nails done or your hair or, things like that, that's a priority to you. Mm-hmm. You have to make sure those are in your budget.
Well, and I'm a plain Jane, so I don't have to worry about that. But I hate cooking. We have 4 kids, so mine is the out to eat budget.
Yeah.
But what else do you see with your kids? You were mentioning preschool?
Yeah, so now that Charlotte is 3.5, this fall she'll be starting preschool. And when I was going through the numbers, I was like, oh my gosh, do they have student loans for preschool? I mean, it's really not that bad, and I was being a little dramatic. It's just something where I'm like, shoot, I got to kind of redo my budget a little bit so that I can manage that.
Yeah.
And then next fall, Katelyn will be in preschool too. So actually we'll have 2 in preschool at once the way their birthdays fall.
Well, and that's like the equivalent of a car payment.
Yes.
And it's not, in your lender's not factoring that in because that's not on one of the things that they're looking at. So that's crazy.
And then I put Charlotte into gymnastics this past fall to get her some socialization and stuff. And this past week, the teacher was like, she's always pointing to the cheer uniforms in the room. And it's like, I want to be a cheerleader. I want to be a cheerleader. And they're like, oh, just come in for this little free clinic. We're getting ready for next year's season. And so she goes in, and she's usually a little bit shy. She ran in, loved it. She was the youngest in the class with kids like up to 7 years old and was keeping up with these 7-year-olds. And, she was just having the time of her life, even more than she likes the gymnastics. So they handed me the paperwork of, like, if she did this next year. And it's like $135 a month for her to do this cheerleading from October to April. And then you add in she would need shoes and the uniform's $100. And all this stuff. And
that's if she can stay in the same uniform and not outgrow it during that time frame.
Yeah.
At her age.
So now I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, I need to either figure out my budget so that I can afford this, or sell a house to one of these clients at the cheerleading clinic, or
there you go.
or she's gonna have to wait until she's a little older. I don't know. We got to figure that out. But it's just one of those expenses that you don't really think about until the time comes.
Right. Well, and for us, it's similar too. So, we have 4 boys, and we have a boy who drives. Now, I knew insurance for teenage boys was expensive. Holy moly, I had sticker shock. And my son, and I'm not afraid to admit this, he's a better driver than I am, like much. But my insurance is way down here and his is way up here. And we do pay his insurance, and that's, some parents do, some parents don't. We don't pay for his gas, but mine are between 9 and 17. So we have their workout classes that they go to at the gym. That's $150 for 3 of them a month. And then we have a grocery. If anybody wants to know what a grocery budget looks like for 4 boys, it's $800 a month. And then we have an out to eat budget for $200 a month. Now, I will tell you that with 4 boys, 2 teenagers who like wings, that's like 2 times of going to a restaurant as a family and 1 time a McDonald's drive-thru when you're in a bind. I mean, it's not like we're going out all the time. And then, my boys, we are big into hand-me-downs at my house because we've had the 4 boys, all with summer birthdays, but they're to the point now where that's almost impossible because they're wearing their clothes longer, and they always have shoes, and they wear the shoes out, so all the boys get new shoes at, X amount of pop. I don't know. My husband takes care of that, and then you have things like giving to your church if you're tithing, or dates. Like my husband and I go out on regular dates, and we don't make it expensive. I mean, in case I didn't make that clear, I hate cooking. So when we go out, it's on a date. There's going to be a restaurant involved. But, cell phone bills, those are all things that we're seeing with our kids. So it's not like you can say, well, I have little kids, it's not that expensive. Or my kids are older, so they're going to have jobs and pay for their own stuff. There's all these other things that come into it. Like diapers.
Prom.
Yes.
Now, prom, those dresses are super expensive now. Luckily, you have a boy for that, but I'm sure corsages, the tickets.
Well, and not only that, but we ended up buying him a suit because buying it was cheaper than renting it. Actually, just about the same price or a little bit less. So I'm like, well, one of the other boys can wear it, or if he's got a wedding to go to or something, he'll have it.
Yeah.
But it was $200. I don't know what a dress cost, but I'm just like, wow, which is totally fine. Like, we were happy to do that because we wanted him to go, and, that's all great. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying you're right. It's things like that. Yeah. And even buying 4 boys tennis shoes every year. Or my husband bought our son wrestling shoes, and I about crap my pants when he told me what he paid for those. I'm like, are you kidding me? But he's like, it's not like they went by a certain name brand or whatever. That was just the cost of having those. And so all that goes into play too. And I know, like, for us, and I'm sure for you guys too, because it was like that when our kids were little, there's times that you're like, oh shoot, we have to go through a drive-thru. We've been going all day. We've had practices, games, and that is maybe not in the budget, but you have to feed these kids, or I'm sure you see that too. So, and there's also those, let's call them mental health things, like getting your nails done is relaxing, or, a massage or whatever, where it's just that for you.
Doctor visits.
Oh, sure.
Medical bills. Those aren't in your debt to income ratio either.
No. Only,
so.
No. Like if it's like a payment that you're making to the doctor every month and it's not in a collection or anything, then that's just something that you're paying. Or, sports physicals or any of that stuff. And like I mentioned, diapers. Oh my gosh, I feel like we were in diapers forever at our house. And those aren't cheap either.
No.
So
formula, when they're little, it's just, there's always a replacement for, you just think, oh, we're done with formula, we're going to save so much money.
Yeah.
And then you're just spending it on something else.
Yeah. And I think part of that too is just having a plan. Like, here we go again, talking about careers. We talked about college last week, or 2 weeks ago, but having a plan by knowing all of the expenses that you're going to have, and if you change your mind. So I worked with a girl years ago who was adamant she wanted to be a professional working mom, and they maxed out their debt to income in all of those areas, in vehicles, in the house they could pay, because she was always going to work. They had factored in childcare. Well, what happened is she had that baby and didn't want to work anymore. and didn't like her job anymore and was kind of bitter because she wanted to be home, but they literally could not do it because they would have to sell their house and everything because they had based their budget on, 2 incomes. So some of it is just, you just being honest. Like, if you want to stay home, just have that discussion of, okay, well, that means we're going to go from X amount bigger to X amount smaller, or write down every possible thing that you could spend money on, and then don't go away from that. Like, I love it when someone's like, well, we go out to eat every Friday now, but if we get a house, then we're just going to cut it back to not going out to eat at all. And I'm like, no, you're not, because that's your thing, and that first or second Friday, you're going to be like, I'm really missing this. Yeah. So don't you think that's important to not cut those things out and be honest about it?
Absolutely. And I have friends right now that are looking for a house, and they're being so good and realistic about their budget and their payment, because she's like, I might decide to stay home when we have kids. So they're kind of budgeting that in their mortgage now for while they're buying the house, so that they have that option, even though they don't want kids for maybe another 5 years or so. Mm-hmm. She's just kind of planning accordingly so that she has that option, and they're not maxed out where she's stuck working a job she doesn't love, or whatever the case be.
Yeah. And I think when you're renting and maybe you're not thinking about buying yet, you should make sure you have a plan for saving for that house. Mm-hmm. Because there are loans where you can have no money down or little money down, but why not get in that habit of, okay, we want to have a house, let's put X amount away, whatever that might be, whether it's $50 or $500, like, your budget, but make sure you're doing that, or putting money away for savings too. So those are the things that I would say I see the most.
We wanted to touch too on gross versus net income.
Yes, I just don't understand this. This is so confusing to me. So when you're doing a loan, they're basing your debt to income ratios on your gross income. Now, I'm not a lender. Katelyn's not a lender. You want to talk to your lender. But, if your gross income, that's before taxes are taken out, before your insurance is taken out, if your employer does that, it's the big amount that your paycheck is not having all of that in there. So
it's the amount that you look at and you say, wow, I made this much, but yet my check is only this
Exactly. And so what I would say to people, that's why I think it's so important to say to your lender, okay, I've done my budget and I can afford X amount per month. Where does that put me? And then if it puts you at 100 and they say you can go up to 200, don't go up to 200, because you're either going to hate your house because you're house poor or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's why the more real you are, the more that makes a difference. Because yes, they're going by your gross income. So if you're a teacher, for example, like my husband was, his gross income was that contract amount. Well, I can promise you that was not what his paychecks looked like. So you're right. It makes a difference to know what they're basing on. And that's fine that they do that. Like I said, I'm not a lender. They can explain why and all that stuff to you. But that also feeds into why it's so important to say to your lender, okay, you pre-approved me. Now this is my payment I'm comfortable with. What does that put me at? And then you and your realtor can decide if you want to increase it a little bit if you're not finding anything. And you've had clients do that, I know, Katelyn.
Yeah. But it's also like you have to remember that budget when you decide if you want to buy something that's high into your budget, but you want to fix it up still, you aren't going to be able to afford those fixing up things because you're maxed out and your house broke, as a quote unquote. So that's where you really gotta balance all that out while you're looking through houses. And remember, can I afford these things that I want to fix up? Can I afford this mortgage? If I'm gonna fix it up before I move in, can I pay a mortgage and rent and these repairs and all that kind of stuff too?
Yep. That is exactly right. That's a very good point. Because when you move into a house, there are things that need to be done potentially, or if, or if not, then down the road. So that's good to know. Yeah. All right. We are going to wrap up this episode. Thank you again, Esta, for coming to talk to me. And we will hear from you on the next episode. We appreciate you listening, subscribing, and sharing.